I have a sampler on this
No,
soundboard.
no.
It's already built in here.
Good time zone internet. Hello and welcome to Design Club, the only game design talk show on the internet that will not tick the nudity box due to Twitch's terms of service. I am your humble design host, Will, joined as always by my pal, Geoff. Say hi to the people, Geoff.
Hey to the people, Geoff. I said hey, not hi. Hi, I'm Geoffrey Zatkin. I am Extra Credits studio director, man, low on sleep, and game designer in residence, coming at you from the West Coast, joined by my buddy Will, voice of the people on Twitch, coming from the East Coast right over here.
Yep. Hello, everyone. And today, our topic for your consideration is somewhat of a monumental undertaking. We are going to try and give you the top 10 great design decisions in Baldur's Gate 3's first hour in about an hour. It's probably going to run long. I was going to say an hour or less or your money back, but you can just check the video play time, and that kind of ruins the point. So we're going to try and do it in about an hour.
Plus, you're not giving us money, which makes it hard to do the money back because we cannot return the money because you didn't give us the money.
But they could be giving us money, Geoff, over on Patreon. If you
that's true.
If you click through the link that's down in the pinned comment, come over to Twitch and subscribe. That's a way to give us money. There are lots of ways they could be giving us money, Geoff. Let's not be
like
narrow
right
about
up there.
this.
Somebody just subscribed.
Yeah, somebody just did it. Exactly. All right. So, Geoff, we should probably begin with how much of Baldur's Gate 3 we've played. What is the context for this for our list, right? So, how much of Baldur's Gate 3 have you played so far?
I'm about 20 hours in, still steadily in Act 1 because I'm a completionist and I want to find... Actually, there is no way I will find everything, but I usually go above and beyond probably what the average person finds in their playthroughs, which is why my playthroughs take forever, but I love them.
That makes perfect sense.
How about you?
I am 5 hours in, one of which was spent in character creation, and the reason that I know that I'm exactly 5 hours in is that I can go back and look because I'm playing with Matt, who you probably know from Breakfast and all of our animated stuff here on the Twitch channel. We're actually be playing right after this is recorded. So Thursdays, if you like Baldur's Gate 3 and you're like, wow, Extra Credits is doing stuff about Baldur's Gate 3, yes, and we're playing it too. So you can come on over and watch us play that. I am playing a Forest Gnome Druid. Matt is playing a Silver Dragonborn Monk, and it's about as chaotic as you would expect given that combination of things.
Man, I was so trying not to play a bard, and I relented and played a bard, and I'm having so much fun being a bard.
Awesome.
Because lore bard.
Yeah.
I just mess with everything, as one should. By the way, Grass in chat just said that they're 70 hours in and just finished Act 1, so little bit of context, or little content. Content. There we go.
With that in mind, there will be probably some minor spoilers for Act 1. There will be nothing past Act 1 that we discuss here. There will also be one moment that will give you a good verbal heads up. If you've not seen the introduction in the introductory cutscene, we're going to watch it and talk about it. There is kind of a moment that may be a touch triggering for part of the audience. We'll call that out before it happens. And our last very brief disclaimer here is that I am capturing the game 3 times for reasons of recording it for Janet at home, recording it for Brad live, and showing it to Geoff as we do it. So if you notice any tech problems, we've done our level best to get that.
But they are not the game. They are the process of capturing the game, because the game looks amazing.
Yeah, the game looks, feels great, is wonderful. That's entirely my fault, so blame me, not the game. All right, cool, great, excellent. So, Geoff, are we ready to pull the game up on screen and begin diving in?
I'd say pull it up, but before we dive in, I want to go over, just from as a professional game designer, what a game needs to be accomplishing, at the beginning of a game needs to accomplish, because I want to set that up as a checkmark list of things that Baldur's Gate does or does not do.
Excellent. All right, so here is the...
Oh, I got small.
You did indeed get small. I had to ensmallen you to make this come in, and we've got some lovely bird background
And this looks
noise.
so good in the new coffee shop background set.
Yeah, it really does. Okay, so Geoff, what things does a game need to accomplish right from the get-go?
So right from the get-go, any game and every game needs to establish a couple of things. The first one is the world intro. Where are you playing the game? Because that gives you the setting. And that, for different kinds of games, is what makes them feel different. The difference between Gran Turismo and, say, Twisted Metal is partially the world that you're playing in and what you expect to come out of that.
Yeah.
The same as, say, Cyberpunk versus Mass Effect. Very different worlds that you're playing in. You also need the character intro. Who are you in this world that you're playing in? And, you know, everything from the simplicity of Mario Brothers that still gives you a good idea of what that is, all the way up to the complexity of a BioWare game, where you could be playing as a character or almost anyway. The third one is the gameplay intro. You know, how do you play the game? What is the gameplay of the game going to be like?
Right.
Because that needs to be established early on, because you might like the world and your character, but if the gameplay doesn't match the kind of gameplay you like, that's also a thing that the game kind of needs to express early and lead you into how to do it. And the fourth one is is a combination of your player and your character. So you and your character's goals for playing the game.
Right.
In other words, why are you playing this game? And kind of setting up early what you and your character are looking to do in the game to kind of draw you forward into the actual game itself. So we need an introduction to the world, introduction to your character, an introduction to gameplay, and an introduction basically to your motivation, both you and your characters. And all good games hit all of those very early on.
Excellent. So we seem to be getting some very, calm, peaceful world introduction here. And we're going to talk about this in a bit. This is, I believe, for contrast. This is
right, and it's also, the game is called Baldur's Gate.
Right.
So what do we see on screen? Big city. Those familiar with D&D will know this is probably the city of Baldur's Gate.
Right.
And they very much show the big wall surrounding Baldur's Gate. So there is actually a gate being shown on screen, which may or may not actually, I'm pretty sure that's very intentional here.
Right.
But they're like, hey, this is Baldur's Gate. Press a key to continue.
Right. And I think that's really important, particularly for D&D. My favorite first level adventure is Sunless Citadel, because it is a dungeon with a dragon in it that features prominently on the in the plot, right? I am a very big believer that games should do what they say on the tin. So the game is called Baldur's Gate, says Baldur's Gate on the tin, Baldur's Gate delivered, let's proceed. So let's jump on into our first menu.
Oh, and this is also, by the way, part of a design choice too. Like, they could have gone right to this screen, and almost every other game does, of, hey, do you want to resume, make a new game, etc. But instead, they are setting you up right here. Here's pretty Baldur's Gate, but we're not starting there. Let's sink down into the Underdark.
Correct. And we get the seal of Baal, and like that is, this is for people who've seen this before. Now there's some lovely choir music going on in the background that we'll keep in ever so lightly, but for the most part, you're probably here to listen to us and not the Baldur's Gate 3 soundtrack. Though, sort of free bonus point, the soundtrack to Baldur's Gate 3 slaps. Like, it just slaps out loud from beginning to end. It's phenomenal. It's great. No notes. So let us then begin a new game.
Okay.
Which brings us to our 0th point. Just like D&D.
Wait, not number, yeah.
It's
we're
not
going to
number
start
1.
at 0, okay.
Yeah, we're going to start at 0 because just like Session 0 in D&D or any tabletop role-playing game, which we've talked about in plenty of places before, Baldur's Gate 3 offers a really great good look at difficulty. I think this is a really, as someone who plays an awful lot of games that start out with menus that superficially seem very similar to this, I was very pleased when I ran into this setting up for this stream. So our 3 options here, and we know text is small on the screen, are Explorer, a narrative experience placing story before combat. The default option is Balanced, a balanced adventure full of challenging choices. And on the right, we have multiple fire-breathing dragons.
Or Tactician.
Or Tactician, a tough campaign emphasizing strategic combat. So this isn't easy, medium, hard. This is, why are you playing the game? Which I really appreciate as a player, particularly, that I'm not being told, do you want to play on easy baby mode? No, I'm being asked what matters to me when I choose to engage in a video game. Just like I would sit down with the storyteller, GM, DM, whatever, when I'm playing a tabletop game and talk about why I'm playing that game. Same question, except phrased different, which I think is cool.
And yeah, because specifically what they're saying here is, how hard do you want the combat to be? Because all of the rest of the game, like there's plenty of people who come in to play BioWare and other type games specifically for the story, and the combat just isn't their thing. And the nice part, again, they're not insulting by saying play on baby mode. They're saying play on explorer mode, which I think is great, because again, it addresses the desire of the people coming to play the game and shows that games can be played in many different ways, and it's an individualistic choice, which is fantastic.
Yep. Excellent. So for the sake of our discussion, we're going to click balanced. And then
Sounds good.
I believe as soon as I click start game, the intro cutscene will play, which means that...
Which is something I'd like to talk about really briefly. There are a lot of games that will throw you into character creation before they've kind of shown you some of the world. Like, you get some of the world based on the loading screens and everything else, and we could do a lot of talking on that, but not today. We've already gotten some of the world atmosphere. For this game, very specifically, they're like, we're going to give you 5 or 6 minutes of badass cutscene to help lay the groundwork of the world you're in and the foundation for the character that you pick.
Yes.
And again, I really admire that. And that's, again, that is a design choice on when you show the intro cinematic or other things around that.
Yep.
Based on what you think is important. And here they're saying establishing your world and your character is very important. Excuse me, the world setting character motivation is very important for you to know about before you actually build your character.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with everything you just said. This is the part where I am going to issue a disclaimer. If you haven't watched the cutscene, there is maybe a moment that may be disturbing to some viewers that involves a bitey worm and the first...
And an eyeball.
And an eye, aka it dives directly at camera. Which is definitely a little much for some people. So I'll probably put a little chapter marker or something below to let you know when you can skip to if you don't want to see it.
By the way, Will, did you know that in video game parlance, there's actually a technical term for the sound somebody makes when they get hit in the eye?
What's that?
It's an ice cream.
We're gonna play that cutscene now. Oh, it does have to load, and loading times are increased as well because I'm reading and writing.
Sorry, I'm just watching chat and seeing how many times I get dragged down to pun jail now.
Yeah.
And here we go. I love too how the tone and color kind of matches the initial character loading choice screen. So the transition in is really nice. And if you haven't played D&D before, this is a Mind Flayer, and they are some of the big bads in D&D.
Sure.
And have been since first edition.
I don't think we need to know that though. Like the ominous, the floating thing is really cool.
Yeah. Character point of view right here.
That sound though can only be described as moist. No, thank you.
And good Wrath of Khan kind of vibes.
Most of our audience probably hasn't seen Wrath of Khan. So it happens to someone else first, so we see what's going to happen. Right? And I think that is important.
Right. Because it lets them keep this in first-person view for you.
Yep.
You know what's about to happen.
Yep. Did it have to change focus? Okay, all right. Yeah, there's a worm. All right, so if you were looking away, you can look back now. Worm is gone, and we're on the character creator.
And by the way, the last thing the Mind Flayer says there, the "Who are you?" leading right into character creation. And the majority of the cutscene movie then actually plays after this. But this is the part, they basically set you up. It's like, okay, we're throwing you in here. You know you're going to be starting as a captive. You know that something just got implanted into you. The mindful look says, who are you? And it pushes you right into character creation.
Right.
And that's just narratively great. And the fact that they, after this, as you design your character, they're then going to be able to show your character in all of the rest of the cutscene to bring you in even more to the story in the world.
Yeah.
So,
and
A+ on choice.
Absolutely. And I think the other really big thing that's very important is we already have part of our character's motivation, right? Your motivation in this game, right? Your motivation is already established. You have a worm in your head. Who has a worm in their head? Tell us about the character with a worm in their head, right? It's not, I don't know how many of you are experienced with this, but if you get a bunch of friends together and they've never played a tabletop game before, you can, and no one gives them like a strong hook or a strong theme, you'll get like 4 people who are all edgelords with no reason to be in a party together, and that's not helpful. So this is a really great way to establish what your character's motivation is before you even make them, right? My favorite example that I've ever heard of this is one of the best ways to start an evil campaign is you start as a level whatever evil character. Tell me why you are condemned to die. And that forces you to build the character within constraints and with a purpose in mind, rather than simply build me any character knowing nothing about why you're here. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and like for the last couple campaigns I've run, I've done the reason I was so happy about watching this is this is literally how I, like, as a game designer when I'm playing D&D with my friends, start off campaigns. Like I ran a campaign a while ago where it was like, hey everybody, you are going session 0, you're getting captured and you're going to be put in a gladiator arena. Build a character who would be a good starting point for them having been a captured gladiator.
Right.
There was another one which was session 0 is going to involve you joining a mercenary company. Build a character who would join a mercenary company. And because of that, we get an entire party worth of people who kind of fit in and have somewhat of a common reason to be together. Yes. And it makes the session 0 and the session 1 so much easier. Minor spoiler here, which we're going to get to and is not a huge one. Everybody in your party also starts out infected.
Yep.
Like, I'm just going to skip to one of our later points because it came up so nicely here, that they are giving a reason for your entire party to be grouped together. And as opposed to some games where you're like wandering and you're like, hey, town guard. Town guard says, hey, nice to meet you. And then suddenly town guard is in your party or thing like that. And you're like, why is town guard traveling with me? Or, you know, whoever it is. Or wizard who's been sitting in his tower for a century suddenly decides to get up and journey with me. Like, this one here comes in, everybody has a reason.
Yeah.
They're infected with a thing that may kill them. Let's all go search for that cure together because we all need it.
Right.
Like, that's great.
Very good. All right. So that was our so we got through point 0. Point 1 is the intro movie is just amazing. The intro movie really
and
does.
We'll come back to that as we get out of character creation and watch the rest of it.
Yep. Number 2. The story characters, the origin characters are all present right here. You can play as any of these characters. And
why don't you click through a couple of them so we can see them since we've got it up on screen?
Absolutely. So we've seen Lae'zel. That's how I always pronounce her. I think that's wrong. I think it's Lae'zel.
I think it's good enough for stream.
Yeah, good enough. So you have options, right, of fully fleshed pre-built characters. And I do want to point out that I could just pick Lae'zel and hit go and be in the game. I don't have to do anything more than that. I could be like, oh yeah, I saw that other person. Well, I want to play as them because they seemed kind of cool, and I've always wanted to play a Githyanki fighter, and that's it, right?
Githyanki.
Potato.
Anyway, but yeah, so couple things on the pre-made characters. So there's a couple of really great things here. All of these character options are built well enough. Like, you can choose them, and they're good. But almost more than that, before we get into the distribution of pre-made characters, these are all story characters here. So like if you click through the characters up there, you have Gale and you have Will, and just these are characters who are going to seamlessly integrate with your party, because it's dangerous to go alone, and you can choose to play them or you can choose to recruit them into your party. And for me, one of the brilliant things here is because you see them during character creation, you know who they are when you're introduced to them later. So you don't have that weird thing if you walk by somebody who could possibly join your party without realizing it, because anybody who's even done a tiny bit of tabbing through or sees the character portraits here identifies and goes, oh, those people, especially because you see the Githyanki in the cutscene before you get here, and realize these are probably going to be people who you encounter and play with, and that's great. And one of the interesting things, Will, see the little play introduction button in the middle left?
Yep.
That's really cool. If you hit that, you will get a small cutscene per character where they introduce themselves a little bit, kind of on the who are you thing. And you can skip through this if you want to watch it or not. But this, again, like, I was curious. I went through all of these, and so before I even recruited these characters into my party where I bumped into them later, I already knew who they were. I'm like, cool, here's my fighter, there's my barbarian, here's my warlock, and it was really neat. Like, I don't think I've seen this done this well in any of the games at least I've played recently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it puts you right back here.
Yeah, it's very interesting too. They don't want you to skip it once you've hit go. You have to mash through.
Oh, is there not a skip out of that?
No. You escape brings up the menu, and you have to mash space to get through it. Very interesting. So yeah, I totally agree on all of that. So that they have a story. They are also a way that you can. They're just more world building, right? Even if you don't play as any of them, they're an additional source of world building. For maybe I don't want to play Lae'zel, but I do want to play a different Githyanki, right? And now I can build a headcanon and a backstory and a relationship with this other NPC that I've already seen, right? I have the grounds to do that. I have the ability to do that if I want to, which is really cool. Right.
And you'd also mentioned something during when we were doing chat pre-show that this also, for you at least, gave you a reason to recruit. Like, I think you'd said, what was it, Astarion?
Yeah.
You had some...
Well, Astarion is, again, Act 1, spoilers. He's a vampire spawn? It says right here, 200 years serving Cruel Master, the vampire spawn Astarion. Not really a spoiler, right? I will... generally speaking, would not make deals with vampire spawn. It tends, in my experience with such video games, to go poorly. Amazing, right? But here, because they've been presented as a playable character, we're able to do. I get a better sense that like there's a way that this can work, and not this is a cutscene that is intended to see if like. He can trick me into drinking my blood right off the bat, which, may or may not be an option, and that may or may not be an end game, but I personally would be less inclined to take Astarion into my party if I hadn't seen him here.
Right. So again, they do a whole bunch of stuff here really well about, laying the groundwork of the world and the story and the characters just by showing you them in character creation and kind of giving you them here. So... number one was the cutscene is really well done for introducing you to a lot of things. Number two for us, the story characters. Yep. Like the story characters are great. The way they introduce them are great. And honestly, the way that they play out, each of them feeling very different on their introductions are also all really good.
Which brings us to our third point, which is that they are all different archetypes. All of these different characters, even if you don't play them, are also serving as different archetypes, right? Nobody shares... I think we've got 2 humans, and that's it. But everyone else is a different...
race, class, and
class combination.
And there's only one... For the D&D players, there's only one ability score overlap.
Correct.
Which is strength for the fighter and the barbarian.
Yeah.
But you have Astarion, the rogue, with Dex, You have the fighter and the barbarian with strength. You have Will, the warlock with charisma. You have Shadowheart, the cleric with wisdom.
Right.
And
we should probably bring up the Dark Urge as well.
Let's get to that in a minute.
It just.
Actually, go ahead.
I'm mentioning it here because this is not an origin character in the same way. The Dark Urge is its own archetype that is much more customizable than the others. So if you're seeing it and you're like, why are we ignoring it? That's why it's a different category of thing. But we've been going through the categories and we were listing them all. And I wanted to clarify.
Interestingly, that's the only one that you can't recruit into your party later.
Correct.
That is, which of course doesn't actually matter here. You're just seeing things you could be building. And the Dark Urge is actually, I wonder when they added it in development, because it is actually a standalone different story character. If you play as the Dark Urge, you will have an entirely different Baldur's Gate 3 experience than if you play as any other character. And so they're already also kind of setting up the replay value, which is, do I want to play as the evil? And you can play an evil without playing that.
Right.
But this is, you want to play as the evil power hungry thing, possibly? Yeah. Here's a starting point for you. Yeah. But you'll also notice, can you read the description for that?
You remember nothing but a path paved with blood. Unimaginable cruelty whispers to you from within. Can you escape it? Would you even want
And then the
to?
line under that.
Your appearance and class can be fully customized.
Right. So this is the only one where it says that. Every other one, if you're going to go pick Astarion the Rogue, you are playing Astarion the Rogue. Right. If you're playing the Dark Urge, you basically can shift it to be any race class combination that you want and still get that story background. So again, that's the first time I've actually seen something kind of like that in this kind of game. And I'm sure there have been other examples, but again, just very impressed with this. But, kind of going back. Oh, go ahead.
I did also want to draw, this is sort of a bonus one that I just noticed as we were going through this, and we're going to get a couple of bonus points. Alignment isn't mentioned here.
Yep.
Right?
Very specifically.
Very specifically not mentioned here. That was a thing, I believe, in Baldur's Gate 1. It's been a hot second since I've played either of the previous Baldur's Gates. But it's not mentioned here, right? You kind of have to figure it out, and I like that it does add...
It's mutable, too.
Right, yeah. It adds more ambiguity and fluidity towards your relationship with these characters than you might otherwise have if they were like, yeah, Astarion's a neutral evil vampire spawn. That says a lot more than Astarion's a vampire spawn. You'll have to learn more about him, right? So it's leaving it open-ended in that way.
Oh, absolutely. And for a story-based game, I very much appreciate this. If this had been a tactical game that was, purely tactics, that might have been an interesting thing, because there are in D&D mechanics some things that interact with good and evil, law and chaos.
Right.
But that is a issue that they're more interested in the story here, and it's one I fully appreciate.
Yep, and those elements of D&D 5th Ed do exist. I found a protection of scroll from good and evil.
Good and evil.
Yeah, it's pretty
Though that spell in 5th edition is very different than it was in every other edition, because now it's more towards things like devils and celestials and outsiders.
That's true.
Than individual characters. But anyway, kind of going back to it, so the characters, like, as somebody who really likes to min-max some of their things for fun or look at the optimization potentials, all of the characters are good enough. None of these characters you would select and be like, wow, this is an awful build. They all come in good enough at level 1 for you to pick any of these and be pretty happy that they do the thing on the packaging. Astarion the Rogue is going to come in and be able to do what you think a rogue should do. In the same way that if you pick Gale the Wizard, he's going to come in and do the things you think a level 1 wizard should do.
Correct.
That being said, they are mildly unoptimized. Like, if you're a perfectionist, you can look at that and see where they could have some improvement, which leads to a thing we'll get to later about respecking. But they are all, in my professional opinion, done well enough, which is great, because there are plenty of games where they aren't.
Yep, absolutely. I also like that you can see more about them just by zooming in, which is really great. You may
and
not.
They on the go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, you also may not. Speaking of zooming in, you may not be able to see the text very clearly. There aren't a lot of text size options, but these tooltips as you go through are very thorough.
That should have actually been on our top 10 list of how good the tooltips are, actually. Bonus.
I have some quibbles, I think, with the tooltips, but that's probably its own whole Design Club episode in which we use Baldur's Gate 3 as an example on tooltips in video games. Because I think that there's a lot there. But yes, you can see he's got Grease and Fog Cloud. He probably doesn't need both of those. He's got Grease and Fog Cloud and Sleep.
Well, he also has more spells in his book than he will be able to load into memory at a time. So what they're doing is they're giving you options of which way would you like to play.
Yep.
While still leaving you the chance to find good level 1 scrolls very early in the game.
Yep.
By the way, can you find one of the long tooltips and hover over it and hit T? One of the ones that... So if you do that, anything that's highlighted, you can then mouse over to see what that does or what that means.
So I can see what is happening for 10 turns of which bolt here. As an example.
Or other ones that might say, this gives the dazed condition. You could then mouse over dazed to see, what does that actually mean? Or what does prone mean?
What does prone mean? Or, why would I take Grease? But yes.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So, yeah, I mean, they do some pretty good stuff on that. But anyway, so yeah, one of the nice parts too is because each of these are kind of strong over archetypes, their roles don't really overlap. So anyone you pick, if you picked Gale and then brought other pre-mades into your party, you're not going to feel like they're stealing the thunder of what you want to do. Yes. So again, good selection and design around this, which is great. And the nice part too, go ahead.
There is one caveat to this, which is kind of interesting, which is if you are playing a multiplayer game and someone is choosing one of the origin characters, the other players who are also in character creation are locked out from choosing anyone who is crucial to that origin character's backstory. So it's not, you can't have an all-player controlled, like if you have 4 players in your multiplayer party, there are some restrictions on how you can build that party of pure origin characters. I bring that up as a small disclaimer in case anyone's hearing Geoff talk about this and immediately going, oh, I want to play with all my friends and we all want to play these really cool characters. There are restrictions on that, just so you know.
Right. And which is cool too, that they've gone through and they've just said they made a choice. We want our characters to interact with each other enough that we are willing to lock out a couple things to make the story better.
Correct. All right.
But,
so we've talked a lot about the origin characters. We should probably keep moving and talk about this big old button up here that says custom, because I feel like that's probably our next spot to go.
So yeah, we just did pre-made characters. We kind of covered before, but point 4 is this means that with the pre-mades, because they're good enough, you can just select and play. As Will said before, you could select Gale, you could hit proceed, and congratulations, you're back to the cutscene and in the game. You don't have to do anything else.
And just as importantly, that also applies to the custom character, right?
That's true.
I can, so I have here a level 1 wizard, right? I can just hit randomize and get a level 1 gold dwarf bard, and I can, or a human bard, or this monk, right? Or this paladin. And I can just randomize through until I find a character that I want and mash proceed, right? And that the fact that that the randomization is within a range.
There's a lot of design work on the background to make sure that each thing selected is good enough that you can go forward with it.
Yes.
The hair in this game, just bringing that up from chat, that the hair on the dwarf was fab. The hair on this game is surprisingly good.
Yep.
Like, just as a quick somebody who's worked over 20 years in game development, the hair in this game is surprisingly good, and I appreciate that.
Yep.
It can be really hard to do good hair. But anyway, so number 4, you can just select and play. There, just kind of the right amount of choice. And what I really like too is with 6+1 origin characters, they're avoiding something that we call design paralysis. Excuse me, not design, choice paralysis, which is where you get such an overwhelming option of things that you have a hard time designing. There is some of that when you're going to create a custom character, but kind of the 6 unique looking characters, each with their own class, is something that, just kind of, if you do a lot of research, is a very good number for presenting it that doesn't overwhelm the player.
Yep.
And they've done a lot of work on the voice and the appearance and everything else to keep the choice paralysis from, creeping in at that point.
Okay.
So select and play, that was number 4.
Number 5.
Number 5.
Let's talk about character customization. So, like we said, you could just mash go, but you don't have to, and people can and will spend hours in this. So we're going to divide this into 2 parts, and I'm going to tell you what part number 6 is now, and then we're going to go into each of those parts. Part 5 is the mechanical character customization is dope. Part 6 is the visual character customization is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, even more awesome and completely separate from the mechanical character customization. So...
well, actually, Will, I want to show you a really cool thing on this that I also appreciated that goes into the mechanical customization.
Yes.
And we can talk about VCR design in a minute. Click on one of the pre-mades for me. Doesn't matter which, except Dark Urge. Yeah. Okay. We have a level 1 fighter there, right? Click on custom now. We had a Gith-Yankee level 1 fighter. Congratulations, we now have a generic Gith-Yankee level 1 fighter. If you go back and you click on Gale or Will, actually go click on Will for a second.
Yep, so we've got Will, and then we click on custom, and we get a similar-ish generic level 1 Warlock.
Right, so this is basically moving you in. If you were like, oh, that character is kind of neat, it takes you in what you were just looking at and starts you off by default with the more generic version of them that you could then sculpt from.
Yes, exactly. With all of their spells and cantrips and ability score choices and all of that you can,
So going back to number 4, you can just select and play. You could, from here, just hit proceed and go. Like, if you want to. Congratulations, you're in the game at this point. But they also have a lot of layered design choices you can now make in here. And you'll notice that they have also grouped them into basically appearance and into mechanical, because there's a button at the bottom which says what does it say? I can't read
it. Appearance. So if we click
edit appearance,
we can go through and we can,
and we'll come back to this in a minute. But basically they are completely divorcing the mechanic part of it, of tune up your character with skills and ability points and everything else, from the appearance of the character, which is also great.
Okay, so let's dive in real quick into the basics. We're not going to go into how you make a D&D character or all of the options, but the fact that these little tick boxes off to the left are A, in this order, and B, have this sort of layout where it tells you a little bit about everything, it gives you more details, is just good. This is just a very good thing. This setup is one of the reasons that players spend an hour in here. There's a lot
more.
Or more. There's a lot of information here that you can, spend time reading all of the tooltips, reading all of the class features, and it's very granular without, I would say, being overwhelming. And I think the reason that it's not overwhelming is because we're starting from somewhere. We're not starting from zero. This is not making a D&D character from scratch. In every case, you're always starting from a completely made character and tweaking them step by step until they become the character that you want. And I think the process of tweaking is a lot less mental work for many players than the process of starting from scratch, which can be a little intimidating, especially because while there aren't as many, I'm going to go out on a limb, players who play Baldur's Gate 3 who have not played D&D, those players do exist. Some of them sounded off in the comments when we did an extra breakfast on and talked about
or played an earlier edition of D&D and aren't familiar with. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people coming in who may be unfamiliar with the current system of 5th Ed, which this is mostly based on, with some exceptions. So a couple of interesting things here. The right-hand side basically always shows your completed character on this. So everything there. The left-hand side is for basically tuning them. And because they've placed them on very different sides, it's very easy to see, here's the part I change, here's the part I don't, which is great. And they use something called VCR design, or layered design, for this, which I'm a huge fan of for cases like this, and is specifically made to avoid information overload. And the really short version of this is, in early days, which probably some of you or most of you are too young to remember, when VCRs were a new thing, the very first VCRs, when you plug them into your TV, were much more complicated to hook up. They were a bigger deal to install. That we didn't have the universal jacks with plug and play. And so because this was also a new thing, they were figuring out the interface for this. And the very initial first generation of VCRs had a very small set of buttons. It was, play, record, fast forward, rewind, stop, pause. And then the second generation after that started putting in all these extra things like, hey, I want to record something at this time. Where you start getting to be able to program them to do things. A lot of those put all those buttons also on the front of the VCR. And it overwhelmed people because there were too many buttons to pick from. And it just, people who were not used to this, which was everybody at the time, unless you were a hardcore techie, it just overwhelmed them on choice. And so for the next generation after that, they took all those buttons and they hid them behind. They put them on the back of the VCRs, which sucked because then you had to, if you had your VCR with your TV sitting on it or something, had to look around the back to program it, but it at least got rid of the intimidation factor of all the buttons in front. But the solution that they ended up that worked before they just went all onto the remotes, because this was also before big remotes were a big thing, was they put them all back on the front, but they put this little flip panel. So you would see the top 6 buttons, the play, pause, rewind, etc. on the front, and then you'd flip a little panel down to see all the programmable things. So basically they hid them from view up until you needed to access them. Yep. And this is exactly what the design is doing here. If you go back to class selection, you're not seeing all of on the upper left. Well, if you could hit that.
Which thing?
You're not seeing, one, which should say class, the second one.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah. Is it race or class first? I can't even see up there.
Race. So it's origin, race, class, and then you. Very interestingly, there are little bars that connect the things that are directly a subset of class. So we have class, cantrip, spells, background is separate, abilities are separate, and prepare spells.
So if you go to race, for example, all that you are seeing are the buttons that you can click that mess with race. They've hidden every other thing. Basically, those are behind the panel. You don't have to worry about the weird race class, subclass interactions that you might deal with. It's just, what race am I picking? Yep. Cool. You then go down to class, and if you go to class real quick, pick Bard for me, or just for a moment. You'll notice one of the little tabs on the side disappeared because wizards pick their school of magic at level 1, just like clerics pick their god in this one. But bards don't get their subclass until level 3. So that little tab on the side that was talking about subclass just poofed away because it became unnecessary. Right. So they're able to contextually basically change this to show you the least amount of information possible that you need. And what you also do for this is, if you look at Bard, if you scroll down the screen, you will see what abilities does a Bard get.
Right.
So they're not making you tab out to another thing for that. And this layer of design, the way it's kind of layered on here, is just over time shown to be one of the simple, easiest ways to stop from overwhelming people when you have literally the thousands of choices you could be making combinatorically based on all of this here.
Right. Cool.
That was a little long, but I just want to talk about how well done that is based on really good game design theory.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably about it for mechanical customization. Let's move on to appearance. So,
yay!
Real quick, for the purposes of this, we're gonna let Brad, our chat, choose what character class we make. I'm gonna make an appearance, probably.
Oh, by the way, race or class, which one should they pick, or both?
Just class. We're gonna pick the race. We're gonna pick this human first, and we're gonna mess with their appearance, and then we'll go back and choose a class for that person when we're done, so that we can get through the first cutscene. Okay, cool. So, Geoff, there's something that's missing here.
There's a lot that's missing, which is great, and there's a lot that's there, which is also great.
Yeah. One of the big things that is immediately missing from this is the ubiquity of sliders.
Yeah, they're not there.
That's a huge thing that they have chosen to not engage with, right? We're very used to, in 2023, 10 billion sliders for nose, so your nose, right, might be its own
yeah.
section, and you might have like nostril
Eye
width,
width, jaw, cheeks, nostril, yeah. An
Yes.
unending barrage of things that you could be sliding.
Right. So that choosing not to do that is has two advantages, right? One, it's the reduction in analysis paralysis, and two, Geoff was talking earlier about combinatorics. There's less overhead for rendering that character, right, with all of those unique properties in all of the places where they need to be shown in the game, right? So, Geoff, we think there are only three, right? There's the world isometric view, the story or cinematic view, and the inventory screen paper doll
view,
where you're,
or at least those are the three. So there are three main ways, yeah, as well as saying you can see your character. One of which is, again, the isometric worldview. You're tapping where your character goes, they run around, they fight things. As soon as they talk to people, they go into cinematic and cutscene view, which is basically the view we're looking at here, where it's even higher rendered than it is here because they're able to lock it in at that point, but it looks very, very good in cinematic view. And then you have the middle of those two, which is the paper doll view, which is as you're putting equipment off and on your character. And one of the advantages to, by the way, so there are still a lot of things that you can do. Like you're choosing your skin tone here. You notice they did VCR design again there. They locked away the non-standard colors, so you can still pick one, but they're giving you basically, here is the range of colors humans usually are. You can choose to disregard this, but here's what the base set would be. And that's different per race that you play. Can you shuffle through a couple of the faces real quick?
We've got this one. Actually, we can. By the way, there are natural zoom options. These are all one click of zoom on my wheel, which is just another really nice thing. It's not. It's sort of a reduction in thing, and it's making everything look as good as possible. So this is one level of zoom. It immediately goes to this one. That's one click. This is 2 clicks, right? So
they're optimizing the view experience.
Yes. Okay.
By the way, can you click the 1, 2, 3, 4 at the very bottom middle right, the ones that change your gender and height? We're also missing height to the right of proceed.
To the right.
Oh, never mind. Sorry, it's on the top. I can't see because it's small.
Yeah, they're up here now. So we have.
So if you zoom out a little, so we can see what.
Yeah. So we have 4 different body types, right? We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so interestingly and importantly, those are all completely divorced from your identity. You have 3 choices: male, female, non-binary / other. That's also completely divorced from the voice that you choose. So your body, pronoun set, and voice are all completely...
And genitals, which we'll get to in a minute.
Yes.
Are actually also divorced from body presentation.
Yes. So that is a very interesting and accessible way to go about it. But we have short, slim, and then we have tall, broad, and that's it, right? So 1 and 2 are just variations on sort of what I would call a shorter, slimmer build, and then 3 and 4 are just taller, broader builds.
And again, this is a slider we're used to seeing, kind of the height, weight, intersection slider along with all the face sliders.
Right.
And one of the big advantages to doing this is that all of the you can still make a bad looking character, but it's a lot harder. And by default, all of their characters look pretty good. And so from a marketing perspective from the game, the team knows that all the screenshots coming out are going to look a lot better than people who purposely go through and like try and crank sliders to weird things and play like human blob or human scarecrow or other weird variations around that to try and play something odd.
Correct.
They're basically saying that is not part of our game experience.
Correct. Also worth noting that we don't bother with clothes here at all.
Yep. Clothes are actually class dependent.
Correct. And that will change very quickly. And early on, you get lots of options on clothing choices very quickly from an awful lot of sources. So that's a good thing. Oh, you also, of course, get the 360 view and it has a good amount of glide here as well. I did also want to call out that we have something that is maybe a little different. We've got this maturity slider. This is just how like wrinkled your face is, essentially, which I did like. We always tend to get, especially in video games, but in D&D and tabletop games in general, we tend to get like the youthful protagonist. We never get like the old wizened grandma who's out on an adventure with her knitting needles to save her grandson, which I think is a really cool style of story. So you can make an older character. I also did want to point out that they put vitiligo pigmentation on the front page. Like, it's at the bottom for sure, but it's here with all of these other things. It's not hidden away. It's like, hey, this is a thing that people said was important to them in the way that they represent their character, and it's on the front page of character creation, right? Below the fold.
And it's one of the few sliders.
Right. But with all of the other sliders in a place where it makes sense. So we're going to go with this non-binary purple-haired pixie-cut human because, I don't know, I think I like their vibe. And we'll give them a cool facial scar, and let's not do vitiligo with that because their face seems a little busy. We'll give them a couple of freckles, and we'll make them super intense. And then we can go back to edit character, and we just can switch back and forth from those. And I think, for me, that's a very interesting part of this. If you are a person who builds a person in the world and then adds character and description on top of, and then adds the mechanics on top of them, that is supported. It's not what it does first and foremost, but it is a thing that's supported. You just get to go back and forth. These aren't separate steps. Making your character is a holistic thing, and even though we're dividing it into these two parts, it is a whole. You're making a character, not what does your character do? What does your character look like? Those are just two halves in the VCR style that have been...
and they don't get reset, importantly, too. Like, if you pick a new class here, your appearance, you get the new clothing for the class, right, but everything else about the character that you pick, your appearance that you built is still there.
Yes, that's what I meant. That it's all the same thing. It doesn't change it if you don't want to. All right, so I was told, I believe I saw a lot of votes for sorcerer in chat, so we're gonna go ahead and pick a sorcerer. I don't think I mind terribly much having these cantrips. That's pretty good. I like that it shows you all of the available ones to you, and you just get to pick them.
Yep.
I like that a lot. Spells are chromatic orb and magic missile. I think I'm fine with that. I probably don't.
Sleep is so good, or shield. Yeah, like. It's so interesting. Everybody has their, and this is a great thing too. Everybody has their personal favorites.
Right. We have to pick our subclass right away. I'm gonna be a storm sorcerer. Because
notice that changed your outfit too.
It does.
The subclasses actually change outfit in addition to class.
Mm-hmm. You get some amount of draconic scales with your draconic bloodline if you want them. So that's kind of cool. Background will be a noble. I like being a noble. And then I like that this is the last bit. You can change your stats, but you don't have to. These are fine, right?
The same with the skills down below. Like I almost missed the skill button the first time.
Yep, correct. You can change these and choose what your proficient.
Yep. 2 skills from class, 2 from your background.
Correct. And it shows you what what your active bonus is to each skill, regardless of whether or not you're trained. Importantly, they do a lot. I think that establishing that this is the baseline range is good, so you don't get people dumping 2 stats to have 3 15s.
Yeah, but again, you can if you want.
Yes.
And in some cases, they're doing this to protect some of the, I'll call them people who are too used to optimizing in 5th edition, because skill checks play such a big part in this game. And for a lot of people who play D&D, they don't. There are a lot of D&D games that are purely combat focused. Letting people, kind of giving them the hint early on that you may want some other stats, or rounded out stats as opposed to dumping, is a nice little thing, so that if you optimize those out for other things, you at least are doing that consciously as opposed to accidentally.
Correct.
Which is great.
So there is a question from chat that I do think we should address here in a very easy way, which is, what do we think about a lack of a screen here or anywhere else that shows all the details of what a class gets at future levels? I think it's fine because of a point that we're going to get to in a bit. That is a thing that many people might expect of a character creator. The problem is that at future levels, you can choose anything. The ability to multi-class is incredibly free. There is an achievement that has been revealed that is take one level of each class. That's an achievement. That is a playable style. So adding what things get what doesn't feel like it would be very useful here, especially because the game very early on introduces the ability to respec into the
other things. And we'll come back to that.
Yep.
Like, if they didn't have that, I would say showing what upcoming levels do is more important. Mm-hmm. But because they have that and it's so easy to do, I think that them deciding to declutter the character creation screen and help avoid information overload was the correct design choice.
Yep.
But again, different people want different things. What I'm saying, I think what they did was correct for the mass market version of the game they wanted. If you want the most people possible to play it, there are always sacrifices you have to make that a more narrow group of players might have wanted.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about...
Let's go look at the rest of customization real quick, because just at least to show it, like, we only showed body.
I mean, there's not...
Oh, to the right, look at all the extra tabs there.
Oh,
then you have tattoos, facial, makeup.
Yeah.
Just the fact that, I mean, there's a lot more. They VCR layer the character customization, appearance customization in the same way they did the character creation mechanical part for like hair color and highlights and hairstyle and everything else that you want.
Yeah, I think it's good. The only reason I was going to move on is A, for time, and B, because
You like the character?
Well, it fits... I don't think that seeing all of the different facial hair variations that our tiny tiny little sorcerer could have is really
fair. I just wanted to say they have them.
Yeah.
Just in case somebody watching this hadn't seen it yet.
Yep.
Yes, there are things other than just the body type.
Yeah.
Selecting.
There is deep and flexible character customization, but it's all in that same style. Okay,
Right.
cool. So let's talk about something we haven't
Oh yeah.
we have not seen, and that is there's a little tick box, and I'm going to go into my menus and I'm going to go into options real quick, and it's going to be right here, user options. So we have a pair of options here, show genitals and show cinematic nudity. For reasons of Twitch terms of service and the general content level of the channel, we won't be ticking those on, but they exist, and they're a sort of shorthand that I, as a streamer, really, really, really appreciate. Which is, those tell me that the game has those parts available to me, and I don't have to engage with them at all, right? I generally, when we play games with a more mature tone, I generally try and do a very complete list of content warnings and what's available in the game. If we play anything that's rated higher than T, and for some T games, looking at you, Final Fantasy 14, and so this lets me just turn that off for my content. If that's not something that I want in my D&D experience, it's not there. But it does exist, and they did a really good job with it because it follows the same rules as every other part of character customization. Genital type is independent of pronouns, body type, voice, everything. It's completely independent. It's just another mix and match. You can just do whatever you want with that. So that's great. And
well, keep going. Then I have my own whole thing on that.
Yeah. And the other really interesting part that I wanted to bring up here when we talk about that is Larian did a good job with...
Oh, real quick. Larian is the company that made the game.
Yes.
Just for reference on that. Sorry, keep going.
Yep. Larian did a really great job with actually treating mature content in their game responsibly. When they mo-capped all of the intimate scenes, they had an intimacy coordinator on set. Good. That's the standard now. Like, there's been a whole bunch of discussion about whether or not Baldur's Gate 3 is going to do things to the standards in the industry, and I don't know. But one thing I absolutely do know and will scream about from the rooftops forever is if you're going to have mocapped sex scenes in your video game, you better have an on-set intimacy coordinator for every game that has any mocapped sex scenes forever. That's just the new standard. So I think that is a great thing, and I think it deserves to be brought up when we talk about the fact that this game has sexual content in it. Geoff, go.
And that's actually despite the fact that mocap is probably some of the least sexy versions people are, because they're in a full bodysuit covered with all these little marker balls or points and everything else. It's not like they're in lingerie sitting there doing a mocap scene.
Correct. Yeah, it is very difficult to actually embrace someone as well in a mocap suit. It's also very gross. They're hot.
The thing about mocap suits is you can always see someone's balls.
All right. Okay. You said you were going to leave that in, and I let you. All right. Keep going. So what else about that new to the option did you think was really worth mentioning?
A couple things from both, we're talking going back to world building and character and everything else on this. So a couple things that seeing that in there tells me as both a player and a game designer. Number one, they are telling me straight up front, because we can't see it because it is turned off here. But when you are looking at your character's body in the character appearance thing, actually, if you could go back into character appearance for a moment, and you zoom out, there's a little button on the bottom that would say something like remove clothes or show nude or something. I don't remember what the exact button was, but if you click it, it does exactly as advertised. Your character is now naked. So you can check out their build, their tattoos, whatever, with no clothes on whatsoever, not even undergarments. This tells me as a player, this game is going to have sex scenes in it, because there's pretty much no reason to put that in if you're not going to be showing it at some point. So there is going to be that in there. That's a fun thing to know up front, for as you're building and playing your character, is acknowledging the fact that there might be intimacy in the game. It doesn't get sprung on you. They're anchoring and seeding that in for you right here, that this is going to be a thing that you're going to experience. Yep. It's minorly titillating, pun and no pun intended on that. And it's kind of fun to look at your character as you build it while having the option not to if you don't want to.
Right.
And the fact you can turn it all off with a button is great. But to me, it sets up a lot of their world of the kind of stories that they're going to tell, and gives you the choice on how you want to look during those moments. Like getting to look at your character and then suddenly seeing them later with their clothes off can be a surprise to some people if you didn't get to modify some things during character selection. Yep. And they give you the ability to do that. So again, I just think that was very well done, both for players feeling comfortable, but also for setting up what is going to happen later in the game. Yep. And again, it's very, the zoom levels really quickly. So Will, if you could do the 3 zoom levels again.
Right. So we have 1, 2, and 3.
So if you picture the characters naked for a moment, and we look at the zoom levels again, okay, here's where you see your character naked. Zoom level 2, go back to that, the middle one. Very specifically, they are not letting you zoom in on the genital area. You will see that the zoom here takes you to basically a waist up shot. Yep. So a medium shot, and then number 1 is a close up. So there is no zooming in on genitals or breasts or anything else with a free camera. They're doing it, but they're doing it tastefully. And again, I very much respect and admire that. Yeah,
it is a thing which is included, but is not the point, I think.
It's not gratuitous.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right, so Geoff, I'm going to take us out of the character creator. I think we need to address our last 3 points if we're going to meet our top 10 list in the time allotted. So instead of moving on with the game, I think we're going to move us out.
But the next part of the cinematic is so good, but yes, I agree.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe at the end, if we have time, we'll come back so we just see that our character is then in the cinematic. But we'll see how our time goes.
We will have to check on time because we have not very much of it left, because imagine there's a lot to talk about with this game. So
Number 8.
Yes, number 8. We talked a little bit about this before, but one of the most important things about the way that this game does choices is that it gives you the flexibility to make wrong choices, because respecking is introduced very early on. And I think for me, that's a huge part of yeet things at the wall and see what sticks. I think that is a very important choice for players to help fight analysis paralysis, because analysis paralysis is a huge problem with any game like this where you have a choice that's going to affect a character for a long time. So you get the ability to respec relatively early on. Matt and I have discovered it, and we discovered it about 3 hours into the game, I would say, give or take.
And it's introduced as a game, there's an in-game reason why your character can do this, which I think is also great. It keeps everything grounded in-game, in-universe. And there is a gold cost associated with it, which is reasonable but low. And the nice thing, and it never increases, it doesn't escalate. So it's not like, hey, by the time you're doing your third respec, it's getting prohibitively expensive. It is a steady low amount of gold for the entire game. And that means that there's a little, you feel when you do it, that there's a little bit of it's not free, so you just don't sit there and spam it, but it is such a low cost that even though your mind associates there's a little bit, it is effectively free.
Yep.
Like it costs 100 gold. And you spend, like my character right now is 4th level and I think has 4,000 gold in their inventory. Sure. Like I have plenty of gold. I could respec equivalently as many times as I wanted to, if I wanted to. Like it's enough to be like, oh, okay, but not so much. And currently you can respec everything except your appearance. And we're pretty sure that Larian's going to be adding an appearance later. It was actually a little surprising that wasn't in, but you can go back and re-choose your class, your subclass, reassign your ability scores and your skills, because what it does on a respec is it lets you redesign your level 1 and then resets you to level 1 with all of your little I level up buttons there.
Right. And just as importantly, and sort of in the same theme as this, you can do this for all of your companions as well.
Yeah.
So
the pre-generated.
Right, the pre-generated. So I was very pleasantly surprised in terms of advancement when we were, Matt and I picked up Astarion pretty early. We have it set so that each of us can control one character. That's sort of a bonus thing. I'm not in Matt's game. We are in a game together that Matt happens to be hosting, and we each have control of one of the NPCs that's traveling with us. Matt's got Shadowheart right now. I've got Astarion. That's great. That's awesome. It makes me feel more involved and does a really great job with that. But I get to pick his level up, and I could make his level up like anything, which is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. You could multi-class him. You could pick a new subclass. You can pick, everything that he gets. And it's really good. And what that lets you do is go back and be like, wow, what if I rebuilt my character with a different subclass? What if I didn't like this feat I chose at level 4? What if I'm actually playing a rogue and I want Astarion in my party and I don't think we need 2 rogues in the party? Maybe I want Astarion to be a fighter or a wizard, or I want to multi-class them into some weird knowledge cleric warlock build, which by the way, I completely recommend and talk about later. You can go do any of that. And it's really quick. It's really easy. And because it uses the exact same character creator you used before, you're already familiar with the system. And because you've already leveled up your characters after that, you're already familiar with that system. So it's just pushing you back into things they've already built and you're familiar with to be able to do it almost on whim.
Correct. Okay. Speaking of your party and the people that you bring with you, let's talk about thing number 9, which is that there are so many different interesting reasons to not go alone. I think, so at the very beginning, very close on the eye bite thing, you are introduced to several other characters, right? Lae'zel and I believe it's always Shadowheart in the intro, so that you have a party of some degree in the tutorial, which is great. And that sort of sets the expectation that you're always going to have a party. But there's also, it's very useful to give me as a player begrudging reasons to take a character I don't like, which I think is such a weird thing to say. I don't like Astarion. I don't. I think he's a smarmy vampire, and I don't like him.
Where
But
Arthur, on the other hand, is probably like,
right, Arthur would absolutely love him. I do think that it is very cool that I have a reason to want to bring Asterion along, right, for rogue stuff, right? Because they've paired up all of these archetypes with all of these personalities, right? There's a reason to bring them along, and the opposite might also be true. We don't need Shadowheart. I'm playing a druid. I've got all of the stuff that I need to cover the divine magic healing area control thing. I don't have quite as many undead things, but I can turn into a bear. That's fine. But we like bringing Shadowheart along for character reasons, right? So there are a plethora of reasons, both mechanical and personality-wise, to bring a character along with you. And I think the game does a phenomenal job of that, especially early on before you're attached, right?
right. And you can also, in the same way that you can go respec your character, it's even easier to trade out party members.
Yep.
You can basically go to camp at any point, and they make that very, very easy. And you can just do a character swap. You can be like, hey, Asterion, you're staying here. Will, you're coming with me now.
Yep.
And poof, Will's now in your party. Different.
Will with a Y, not
Yeah.
Will with an I. Different Wills. I know that's confusing. Sorry, chat.
Should have said one of the other. Gale's now in your party.
Yeah, right.
But, and one of the great things too is because they introduce Shadowheart and what's our Gith warrior's name? I always forget it. Lae'zel. Those are the first two that join your party. Having a fighter and a cleric in your party also means that literally no matter what you picked to play, like if you picked support bard, like maybe I did because I want to be a fiend on skills, you have a badass fighter in your party and you have a cleric in your party who has both damaging and healing spells. Anything you bring is going to add to those two and help you be successful for your first experience with the first levels of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. That anything you bring will match up with those two.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, and then last point, the last numbered point, number 10. The entire first level experience is great. And I think we're going to have to elide some of that just for time, because we could literally do an entire second design club on just the tutorial after you get out of the character creator and up to the point where you exit the tutorial zone, right? The Nautiloid. But that whole process of waking up, investigating things, getting party members, casting spells, making a bunch of skill checks, making saving throws, what are these things like? What do they do? Is really good.
Yeah. And from a couple things, just, they're all introduced well story-wise and appropriate. Like there's a lot of times where you fight your first couple battles and it's a giant rat or something that you're just like, really? Like your first couple fights in the Nautiloid, the tutorial level, all are appropriate to your level, but feel also appropriate to the setting that you're in. And because we're going to do minor spoilers here, because we've already said, like the Nautiloid that you're in when you're in it is under attack, things are on fire, a whole bunch of the crew is already dead. You're basically battling to figure out how to get yourself out of where you are. Mm-hmm. And because of that, because a whole bunch of stuff is dead and it's on fire, you're not expecting to be facing big bad mind flayers running around on the ship. You're facing what's left on there while you're trying to get yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And the things that they throw, and you end up, honestly, in the first cutscene, going on a trip through the hells, and a whole bunch of imps fly in to attack you, which are also like low-level creatures. Everything there feels dangerous, but is appropriate to what you should be fighting and what you should be doing. You get good story choices about who you take with you and your companions and everything else. Good loot choices. You find some things. You get to see how the math of the game works. There's plenty of skill rolls and attack rolls. Their interface for that is really nice. And it kind of teaches you how, like, everything in there, they must have done so much user feedback testing and worked with so many UI artists to just think through all the steps for that. It leads people, even who aren't familiar with how to play the game, into those systems and walks them through it in a very nice way. I've read a lot of reports of people who picked up the game not thinking they were going to like it, but just to check out what the hype was, and were suddenly found themselves 30 hours into the game because it ended up being a thing they like, even if it wasn't typically their kind of game.
The bar to entry on Baldur's Gate 3 is incredibly low. It helps if you've played D&D before, but the bar to entry for understanding enough to play in a way that is enjoyable is extremely low. It does a really good job with that. All right, so...
And one final thing before we get out.
Yes.
Something I really, really like on this. They give you a cinematic battle at the end of level, like your tutorial level, where the condition isn't go kill the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really, really like that. The win condition isn't combat. There's combat along the way for the final thing, but it's teaching you a couple things in the game. One of which is not every solution is combat, and which is a great thing to teach you early on in the game. And it's showing you in some cases some of the depth that the game has, that there are great ways to play it where your win condition is doing a thing other than just beating people over the head. Mm-hmm. And that's great.
Yep, absolutely so. All right. We did not have time to get to any of our bonuses. We have like a whole list of bonus features, from all of the additional cool weapon moves that you can do with different weapons that you pick up. All of the really amazing work that they've done making multiple people feel engaged in multiplayer. I think that
their multiplayer is way better than it has any right to be.
Correct. As someone who's playing a support character in multiplayer, it means the world that they actually have like a thing that says, I cast guidance. Matt doesn't get to tell me that I cast guidance. I choose to cast guidance, and then it shows me what effect my guidance has, which is really cool, and I really like it a lot. It's very good. And we hope that you all have enjoyed our little jaunt, our little top 10 things. So I guess we should probably go over them real quick, just to wrap up here. Again, those top 10, because we started with the 0. 0 is difficulty selection. It's establishing buy-in. Number 1, the intro movie. Fantastic, amazing, sets stakes. Number 2, all of the story characters. 3, those story characters are a good distribution of pre-mades that you get to base your character off of. 4, you can just jump in. You don't have to do a character creator, which is great. I actually think that's probably one of my favorites. 5 and 6 are that the character customization is bananas, both for mechanical and for visual stuff. Number 7, nudity is in the game and part of the game, but not the point of the game, and you can turn it off, so it's not in the game. That's all handled so well and tastefully. It's great. Number 8, the ability to respec early and often. Number 9, reasons why it's better to not go alone. Take this. Bringing your party with you. And number 10, the entire tutorial section is just phenomenal. So yeah, I think that is going to do it for our design club today. Geoff, final thoughts on Baldur's Gate 3, besides you're going to play probably hundreds of hours of this, because I know you.
I am going to play hundreds of hours of this, and I'm going to enjoy hundreds of hours, and I'm already thinking about a second playthrough, like what I would want to do around that. But just personal recommendation. If you're looking for one of those games that you can buy once and play for a really, really long amount of time, that you will get complete value for money on hours you play, this is probably a pretty good choice, and they do a lot right, and it's really fun to be able to go support a team with a game you enjoy that made a lot of the right choices. Because if there's kind of that voting with your dollars thing, let's throw a lot of dollars at this so that other teams see this and help also get towards some of those kinds of choices as well.
Absolutely. That's going to do it. We will see you all next time when we talk about something else, but it will probably have to do with Baldur's Gate 3 if I know us. In the meantime, I've been Will. That's Geoff. Say bye to the people, Geoff.
Bye to the people, Geoff. Have a good week, everybody.
Bye, y'all.